Still on the line with us now. Steve Scalise was the House Majority Whip. He was in charge of counting the votes for the president's legislative agenda. Is this going to be interfered with?
Well, it certainly depends on how, what the wounds are. He was shot in the hip. He was playing second base. Senator Flake, a Republican from Arizona who plays in the game, was at bat, and he said, that he heard the whip Scalise scream, and he laid on the field for several minutes and finally kind of dragged himself off the field about 10 or 15 yards until the U.S. Capitol Police were able to shoot and subdue the suspect who had the rifle. Now, I'm told that he has been taken into surgery at MedStar Hospital in Washington, D.C., back into the District of Columbia at Irving Street in D.C. It is unclear on the severity of those injuries. Senator Flake and others indicated they expected him to survive. I was told that at least one member of the police detail, again, Scalise is in the House leadership, therefore he gets a U.S. Capitol Police detail, and a female officer was shot and is also at that hospital. We believe that she was shot in the foot. I asked whether or not she had to undergo surgery, and that is unclear at this point. But again, some of this information is so fragmentary in terms of what we're dealing with here and who was shot and who was injured and everything else. You can imagine it's just chaos here. Things have certainly calmed down on the scene, but when it erupted, it sounded like it was utter pandemonium.
Chad, we are told that if Steve Scalise had not been there, there would be no security. Steve Scalise occupies a senior position within the within our Congress, and therefore received protection. Had he not been there, there would be no protection. Would you expect now that there'll be a lot more protection for a lot more politicians?
Well, one would think so. I mean, that's the interesting thing, because the average member does not get a U.S. Capitol Police detail. When you talk to the security officials at the Capitol, there's just no physical way that they could have, agents and officers on all of these people all the time. So they protect the leadership. Obviously, they protect House Speaker Paul Ryan. He's in the line to the presidency. Obviously, they protect the president pro tem Orrin Hatch of Utah as well, because he's next in line to the presidency behind Paul Ryan. But they have, if you're in leadership on the Democratic side, Republican side of the aisle, you have a detail with you 24/7. And it was interesting. I had a couple of private meetings with Steve Scalise in just the past couple of weeks. In one instance, I was in his office, and there was actually an agent or an officer who stood kind of off to the side and kind of minded his own business. And another time I was in his office, and he stood outside the room. So, there's different ways to do this. But when you're standing out on a field, as Jeff Flake said, it was like they were sitting ducks.
Yes, and with 535 members of Congress, that's a very large team. Chad Pergram, thank you very much for being with us this morning.